Let's get rolling. Well, first of all, hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Sam. I'm Payzaar's head of marketing. I'm here with Jen, who is our product manager, and with Trevor, who is our founder and COO. Before we get started, well, if you've been to one of our webinars before, you probably know how this is going to go. But for those who haven't, I want to explain a little bit. We record all of our sessions, including this one, of course. And what that means is that if you want to rewatch this or you want to share this with someone in your team after the fact, if someone is interested in learning more about Payzaar, you can do that. You'll be able to find this webinar, the recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel. And in fact, if you've never checked out our YouTube channel, I'd recommend you do. You can go to YouTube, just put in Payzaar, you'll find it, and you'll see that you'll find this webinar, and you'll find all the other webinars we've done on there. We talk about payroll technology, about payroll transformation, anything related to global payroll. And I think there's a lot of really good content there. So I'd like to recommend you check that out. The second thing I wanted to mention before we get started is that we like to make these sessions as interactive as possible. And that means that we welcome questions at any point. So you'll see at the bottom of your screen, you have a chat tab and a Q&A tab. If you have a question for us, you could pop it in there at any point, and Trevor and I will try to pick it up as we go along. Okay. And that's pretty much it. So let's get rolling. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk about today, to start things out, I like to start things out with a number, right? We're here to talk about automation, and I want to look a little bit at data, right? So the number is 60%, and this is the consensus figure we've heard from many global payroll leaders explaining how much time their teams dedicate to manually preparing data, checking and validating data, and generally doing data management and data processing tasks, right? So I like to kick this off with a little example. Let's say you have a payroll team of 3 people, right? Each one is working 40 hours a week. That's 120 hours a week. Multiplied by 4, that's 480 hours a month. Let's round that up to 500, which is a nice even number, and let's pretend no one is doing overtime, right? So you have 500 hours, right? If your payroll team is dedicating 60% of its time to data management tasks, data processing tasks, that's 300 hours every month, right? That's 300 hours that you're spending on aggregating data, on preparing spreadsheets, on copying and pasting things from one place to another, on going over line items and checking and double checking inputs and outputs, from the provider, to the provider, from the provider, et cetera, et cetera. Let's assume you can reduce the amount of time that you dedicate to that by 20%. That's 60 hours, right? So that's a week and a half of one person's time, which is a lot of time, right? So 60 hours can be the time you need to actually stop doing overtime, because we're not fooling anyone here. We know what it's like. It can be the time you need to do validation tasks better, right? So instead of doing a random sampling and looking at large batches of data and kind of accepting some level of variance and stuff like that, you can actually shoot for much higher accuracy. And you'll see that this ties in very nicely with what we're going to show you later during the session. And finally, spending less time on these kinds of tasks means that you have the level of staffing that is actually adequate to do the volume of work that you need to do, right? Meaning that your cutoff dates are not as tight, you can hit your targets more comfortably. And this ties in nicely with what Trevor is going to discuss, which is underinvestment or chronic underinvestment in payroll operations, right? So Trevor, maybe you want to pick up from there.
Right, yeah. Thanks for the intro, Sam. I'm delighted to be speaking with everyone again. So it's a big number, as Sam points out, and I stand over the claim that payroll is massively underinvested. I think a lot of the time when payroll is outsourced to third-party payroll providers, globally, regionally, locally, however it is, there's a great service there being provided by those in-country partners, but we need to understand the service that they actually deliver. And I think oftentimes the decision makers versus the payroll practitioners in the business have a different understanding about what's actually happening in payroll. So if I'm the decision maker, maybe a more senior leader involved in this process, I might think, hey, outsource it. Like all of these people I've working in payroll are now gone, as if by magic. My local provider, my regional provider, my global provider is going to take all of this payroll work away. But the reality is that doesn't happen. And even with outsourcing in the mix, there's a huge amount of time that goes into a couple of key tasks around preparing data so you can provide it to your outsourced payroll providers to process payroll accurately on time. And then to check what comes back, because like our benchmark of doing a good job in payroll is 100% right all of the time. So when you outsource payroll, and I'm not criticizing that decision, I'm saying let's just be conscious about exactly what part of the payroll process you outsource. So payroll calculation, right? The easy bit, I would say. But the payroll process starts from the time someone is hired, the time they elect the benefits that they want as part of their contract of employment. Each time pay is increased or reviewed, or there's a bonus. Each time there's a variable payment that needs to be put through, like a commission or overtime. So the payroll process isn't just the calculation piece. That's actually the easy piece, and that's where I think this number comes from. Is that with this chronic underinvestment, you know, the decision makers around that outsourcing decision are disjointed from what the practitioner is doing, and that decision often neglects the work that's left behind. And then when you want to make a business case, for example, to improve those process or to improve the level of investment to make work a little bit better for your colleagues, you know, the budget holders are saying, "But I thought we outsourced this." Well, you did. You outsourced a little bit. You outsourced the easy bit in terms of payroll calculation. And what we need to do is we need to take a look at some of the implications of those decisions. So what's the impact of this underinvestment? So maybe if we flip forward, Sam, we'll take a little look at some of the problems that we see from this underinvestment. Look, everywhere we go, customers we talk to, I think emails, spreadsheets, SharePoints are way up the list in terms of the tools that people are using. And we find payroll as an incredibly labor-intensive operation within the business. So I suppose the example is you're pulling data from different data sources, either, you know, for one country or across many countries, trying to craft that into a format manually to give to your outsourced payroll provider, that global provider, that local provider. And it's very inefficient work because there's this industry of spreadsheets going on, data being combined by you. And actually, when you lift the bonnet a little bit on the provider side, there's an industry of spreadsheets going on the provider side in many cases as well, trying to get your data into their system. So there's massive inefficiency here. Plus that level of intervention results in human error, and payroll is a critical process. It's a critical business process because it gets people in the business paid, which is like vitally important. But it's also a critical process from the point of view that when it goes wrong, it becomes hypercritical. And that's when it gets very, very noisy. And because of that nature of the process, like the business and the employee is expecting, hey, I'm just paid right on time every time. You know, there's no praise for doing on time right every time for all employees. That's just what the expectation is. You can't do better than that, right? So when it goes wrong, it's punitive for those in payroll. And it just means then that because the level of manual intervention involved means that, and the level of risk of error, it means that there's this whole industry of checking going on, right? So now we have to over check and over process. And really what this results in is a lot of work that I suppose a lot of people might think isn't fun. You know, if I'm constantly under pressure to meet, you know, earlier and earlier payroll cutoffs, under pressure to make sure my weekly payroll is right, I'm under pressure a lot of the time. And I'm under pressure to do work, which is, you know, almost in a 1990s style environment when I'm like swimming in spreadsheets, when this stuff should just be technology and tools should just help us. So if I'm under that kind of pressure, I'm not having fun. And then I'm kind of thinking, how do I recruit people into my team, into this environment? And once I recruit them, how do I retain them? So how engaged are our teams in this kind of work as well? And I suppose, you know, if there's human error, we're not particularly engaged in our work. And if we think about data protection issues, like we're all just one click of a button away from emailing the wrong recipient a spreadsheet of containing data that they shouldn't receive. We necessarily need to be worried about things like cybercrime, but the biggest source of data breach in an organization are accidents, sending the wrong information to the wrong recipient in an email, right? So I have employees working in a 1990s style environment, little automation or tools, under pressure, hypercritical, over-checking, spending needless amounts of time checking data. And how engaged are they? Which further fuels human error and risk of data protection issues. So, so I suppose the thing that kind of springs to mind with us is there a solution? And maybe moving forward, Sam, to the next slide. And should there be a solution? Well, I think what we're seeing is we're seeing an environment where we'd like to, focus on the exception. So rather than having to check everything because I'm afraid of making a mistake and because my benchmark for doing a good job is 100% right on time all of the time, wouldn't it be great to be able to think I could spend less time checking everything and optimize my time by just checking my exceptions? I can tell you now, if members of your organization, and maybe it's an idea for you to invite any of Lean Six Sigma staff in your businesses in to take a look at what you're doing. And I can tell you now, they'll be horrified by the amount of over-checking going on. It's one of the key forms of over-processing and waste. And if you were to put your payroll process through a Lean, Payzaar, Six Sigma type process, one of the key things they would hone in on immediately is we can save so much time by eliminating this over checking. So what kind of tools or what kind of things can we do? Well, how about we get better data at source? How about we have tools to validate that data at the point we collect it from our colleagues in HR and other source systems around the organization. And I can tell you as well, because I've seen it, there's lots of source systems. So there's no one API or there's no one silver bullet that's going to say, I'll just go to this one system. It's going to give me all of my data that's going to impact payroll, all of my changes, all of my joiners, leavers, all of my variable changes in a period. And I just click a little button and it just goes to my provider in one simple action like that. It isn't there, but there are tools that are becoming available that will help you to, aggregate, amalgamate, sift, transform that data in the market. And that's a big step forward. So I have better quality around my changes. Then I have variance analysis. So let me see what's happened from period to period. My changes from period to period, so I can see that they make sense. And then when my payroll is actually processed and sent back to me by my payroll provider for approval, let me sense check that data. Let me understand that we're doing the right thing. So it feels kind of right. If there's minimal change, I should see minimal variance in my payroll. Or if I do see a large variance in my payroll, I know I have a problem. And that leads me into better checking. But then we have this final piece, is better input to output. And what we mean by that is checking the payroll changes, your joiners, your leavers, your demographic data changes like bank details, address information, your variable data changes like commission, overtime, benefit changes that are going through payroll, that we're checking your instructions to what you've actually received back from your payroll provider via the gross to net. So with these tools in place, would things just be better with better quality data going to your provider that you've checked and validated? Would it be better with variance analysis? Would I get some time back from that? And if I can focus on the exceptions that I've automatically checked my input to my output, my payroll changes to my gross and net, how much time would that give you back? How many mistakes would be reduced? How much less criticism would there be of of the payroll process when things go wrong. So we have a vision here that we'd like you to imagine a future position where you get the time back. You're not checking everything. You're focusing on the exceptions. And we let software do what software should do. Let the machine do, let automation do what it should do, which is percolate that information back up to you. And a key point, we mentioned automation, and I know there may be some fear out there around automation, but apply automation in places that it makes sense. But nowhere does it say that human judgment is removed from that process. That's why you need tools to say, okay, my changes look sensible. The machine has checked them, but I've reviewed them. My variance analysis looks sensible based on the instructions I've sent. The reports show it to me. I get that automatically. And my input to output, the machine again is checking that information, but I still need to make those judgments. And that's where, technology is fantastic. Well, automation does not necessarily mean we reduce human interaction in this process, because ultimately, back to my earlier point around outsourcing, you don't outsource responsibility and accountability to your colleagues that you're paying every month and to the statutory authorities you're working with that need to have their filings delivered per pay period and to have those payments made as well. So moving on from there, Sam. Let's think, and this slide is kind of representing what we see all of the time with our customers, right? So our customers are international; they're distributed across lots of different countries, and let's just think about an organization operating in 10 countries. Maybe they have a mix of HR systems. They might have a couple of local ones, they have some global ones, and there's some information that needs to come out of those. There's some local HR specifics that maybe aren't in your global HR tool like Workday, whatever it is. You might be paying commissions based on different commission plans coming from sales operations from those different teams. Some of them might be using maybe Salesforce.com to calculate those plans. Others might have some other sales operations tool or calculation to get to commissions. You have salary and bonuses that go through. They might be, held outside in a commission system in a third-party system somewhere. Global benefits, you might have some local benefits as well. Maybe local healthcare is coming through. And it just goes on, maybe some hourly paid workers or some time off that you need to manage, some equity. And if I think about these different data sources, and if I think about maybe just, operating across those 6 or 7 types of payments operating across maybe 10 countries, I might be pulling that information together from 60 to 70 different data sources, right? And I got to transform that somehow to get it to the providers in each of those countries in a format that they need with the local specifics, right? So now I'm taking 60 to 70 spreadsheets targeting potentially at 10 different templates, and I send that off to the provider, right? So the provider goes through this process. You've collected your data, you need to check the data, look for errors, you go through that process again, resubmit your data, you're checking again, and there's a big loop going on here until payroll settles down and is right. So there's this massive industry of checking, right? But how do I get my gross to net back? And I'm trying to check my data, my 60 to 70 data sources going to my set of 10 instructions to 10 gross to nets. And I'm trying to manually figure out, is this right or not? It's like pushing a stone up a hill, right? It's an impossible task to do it with meaningful accuracy. And in fairness, I think the commitment we see from the payroll teams that we work with is enormous, faced with these kind of 1990s style tools and this massive underinvestment. But it is pushing a stone up a hill, and it's really, really difficult when we think about, the bi-monthly cycle, because guess what? You just have crunched your monthly time in 2, and then your weekly cycle. So you could have 4 to 5 weekly cycles to get right every month. This is a really difficult task. But the good news is, if we flick forward, Sam, please, there are tools. There are tools emerging to sort out this mess. We're very excited by by what we're doing to build technology that's no code, configurable type solutions that you can deploy very, very quickly, that recognizes the reality that there's just lots of different data sources out there, lots of different formats, but we're bringing the technology to play to help straighten that out, to get stuck into freeing up that 60% of time, like to get in there to reduce the amount of manual checking so that we put you in a position that you are managing by exception. The tools are available. We've been working hard with our customers to understand what their needs are. We've been working hard with our technology teams to develop applications that can be deployed very, very quickly, to start giving you time back, to start taking your payroll process out of the 1990s and deliver it in a rapidly deployed, low disruption way into your organization to get you into the 21st century.
I'd like to jump in here and make one more point about this, which is the point I'd like to make about these two diagrams is that there is another dimension to this simplification of the workflow that we're showing. So obviously automation of data management tasks is very important. It's a very important part of this. But to be able to develop and implement these kinds of automation capabilities, you need a data model that can admit it, basically. And what that means specifically is that you need a system that can consume and parse inputs from any source system, basically, whether that's a local payroll engine, your HCM, your HR subsystems like time and attendance or benefits or whatever it is, or whether it's just spreadsheets from your providers, right? So you need a system that is data source agnostic. That is compatible and interoperable with any source system, because the reality of global payroll, and this is what Trevor was alluding to just now, is that the vast majority of companies, they don't have a homogeneous data model, right? They have their payroll landscape is very, very fragmented, and therefore their data is also very, very fragmented. So to be able to leverage these kinds of capabilities, you need to overcome that fragmentation first.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Sam, because what you need around that fragmentation is A, to recognize it's fragmented, and B, to recognize it's in a constant state of change, right? So that constant state of change means in certain countries, the business needs to respond to local talent demands by putting new pay elements on there. There could be some statutory changes that come in a different market that mean, you're confronted by a new tax, some new social security that needs to be managed somehow. You've just done an acquisition, so your nice tidy data model is is now taken hostage because you got to absorb this acquisition. You go into a new country. So the key thing is in recognizing that you need standardization, as Sam mentioned, is also to have tools that are flexible, because the organization is growing, contracting, internationally expanding, merging, acquiring, divesting. It's in a constant state of flux. So that's why I think understanding the data model is very important, but having a tool that recognizes that reality and is responsive, and you don't need a legion of consultants to come in and adjust it every time you want to pay someone a little bit differently. Because guess what? The business is not consulting payroll about, well, if we need to hire these folks in this location, they're not waiting for the blessing from payroll to say, we're going to pay these people with these type of local pay elements. The business is going to get on and do it. And if you want to avoid reverting back to that industry of spreadsheets, select tools that are flexible, that'll flex with the organization, that will flex with the reality that is payroll. It's constantly moving. Right. So we believe payroll is broken, and we're here to fix it, right? And it's a big claim, but I'm happy to make that big claim, because if we want to build a successful business, we got to listen to the problems that we're seeing in the market, and we got to try and fix them, right? And we got to try and fix them. And that reality that I mentioned just now, your environment is not getting simpler. it's becoming more complex. You need tools to help you manage this data collection exercise. It's a nightmare. You need support, and the support is here. You need to reduce the amount of waste that's going on in this manual checking. Get away from checking everything and just check your exceptions, right? No more manually hacking data into formats that your provider wants because, you know, that's the data they need to process payroll. Let the machine do it for you. Let the machine do it for you. Like these transformation tools are available, and these tools are self-serviceable, and that's a key thing because, you know, all around us we're seeing the increased impact of technology. Why can't we benefit from that and have smart tools that are helping us do that job in payroll? And let's put a bit of fun back into it. I hear a lot of you know, burnout in the sector, like we've, you know, trying to attract talent to work in payroll and global payroll jobs. Well, let's make it fun. Let's take back some of that 60% we were talking about at the beginning of the presentation. Let's claim that time, and let's think about things that maybe are more fun to do rather than checking pay element by employee, pay element by pay element for data changes. Still achieve our accuracy and our timeliness goals, but let the technology help us to do most of that. And as I said earlier, not remove the human judgment. You know, you don't outsource your responsibility to the technology either. You know, you're still responsible to make sure that your colleagues are paid correctly. But let's make it a little bit more fun and maybe spend some of that time on things that help you to be better business partners, you know, analytics, better governance, supporting the business to expand, getting ahead of that, getting ahead of those changes, because guess what? You know, change is constant. You know, that's our lives. So let's put the fun back into payroll. So back to you, Sam.
Well, I was actually going to say, Jen, if you want to jump in now, I think now would be the time where we could actually show a little bit of how this works and what it looks like.
Absolutely. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. What I'm hoping to take us through today is the journey that Trevor and Sam have mentioned. We've had a look at the before, and what we're hoping to present to you now is after. So I'm going to call back a lot to the with automation slide that was shown a few minutes ago about how we can help make those steps a little bit better, a little bit easier, and how we can help, I suppose, as Trevor said, make payroll more fun and take a little bit of the manual effort out of doing all of this checking. So hopefully you can see my screen now. I'm sharing our payroll dashboard. I'm sure you're all very familiar with it. And the very first thing I want to do is talk about the first step in our journey. Both Sam and Trevor mentioned there the multiple data sources and the very kind of varied landscape that people have to gather data from when they're putting together payroll. So one of our tools is HR Connect, and that is a tool, it's an automation tool really, that's going to allow you to do that easier. It's going to take some of the pain out of that manual processing into formats, the manual checking, all of the work that is being done that's taking all of that time every month. So I've set up a data grid here. It's for my extract from my HR system. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop my HR file onto this. It's an extract from my HRIS. This data grid is set up to take in that data. And one important point that's not super visible here is actually my extract contains data from multiple countries, but in this case, I've filtered it on import to just show me the data that I want to focus in on. So even though I'm only taking in 58 rows in this, there's actually a lot more rows in the data set itself. The first thing that you're going to see here on this data grid is we have some fields highlighted in yellow. Why? Because those are changes. And actually, let's cut to the point here. We've talked about focusing not on the entire data set, but on those exclusions, the exceptions, the things that need to be checked and fixed. So let's go ahead and view our changes. and our errors. Let's have a look and see what do we need to fix in this data set. So if I take a little look back at our data set, we can see that there was a few kind of changes that have come in and a few errors. So let's have a little look at our changes again. So we can see here, we have some changes, a last name change and a join date change. If those are fine, then I don't need to change anything there. I can say, okay, that's fine. It's helpful to see that we've been able to focus in on something that's changed. But immediately what my eye is drawn to here is a red field. This value is mandatory. And somehow in my export, we've missed someone's social security number. Obviously, that's critically important when we're processing payroll, because that's how we're going to understand what allowances, what taxes, all sorts of things. Rather than having to go back to my HR system or do another import, if I know this employee's social security number, if I can look it up, or if I remember it from a previous iteration, I can just correct this in flight. I can say, oh, you know what? We forgot to update that in the HR system, but actually I got an email about that the other day. So there we go. We've resolved Max Campbell's issue. Now we can go ahead and send the data, knowing that we've had a little look and there aren't really any issues. If I try and focus in just on our errors again, we can see another few missing little bits of data here. Again, cost code, it's going to be very important that the cost code is correct so we can make sure that our payroll and our billing is correct. Another missing social security number. Let's just fix that straight away. Now what we have is a data set that is ready to send to our provider. We have fixed the errors in flight, and we've been able to, in addition to viewing the whole data set, really focus in on the actual changes and errors in the data set. Again, managing those exceptions. So we're cutting down on the time that we need to spend checking this data because the system has highlighted it for us. It's gone, hey, do you need to double check? Is this name right? Yeah, Joseph changed his name. We got an email about that. Okay, so we're good to go. I want to bring up one or two more data grids just to show some more of this sort of data validation and also this combining and collating data. So one other thing I want to just show on that is generated fields. Using HR Connect, you can generate fields. So what you see here is a data grid that I have overtime hours and overtime rate, and a lovely column here called overtime calc. That's actually a calculated field. Rather than pre-doing the work to calculate a number, for example, the overtime fee, you can set up simple calculations and have that done for you when you import the data. So in this case, I've got a grid with an overtime rate and overtime hours. And I've been able to just show the overtime calc in here, automatically created for me. Again, all of these things are just taking out the pre-work. When we're talking about getting the data together from the multiple sources into a format that the provider needs and making that submitted to the provider, all of these are just going to save you time. When we see the errors highlighted and the changes highlighted on our HR data grid, we're able to see what we need to focus in on and fix. So, I mean, if you've been on some of our webinars before, you may have seen HR Connect before. And that's really, I suppose, the first part of our data validation and our data automation journey. I know that's something that probably many of you are excited on the call about is the second part of our journey. So that's a new part of our app that I want to show you today. So I want you to imagine with me that we've done our data import using our HR Connect data grids, and we've sent that to our provider. We've jumped forward a month here, and the provider is sending us in our data. So in this moment, I'm acting as a partner. I've received the data from my customer, and I have uploaded a gross to net. Now, if you have ever used the system before, you'll be very familiar with these tabs, the data variance tab, for example, that Trevor mentioned before. But we're here to talk about automation and how we can make your life easier. And how we can make your life easier is with our two new tabs here, data validation and joiners levers. So what are we looking at here? Data validation is a tab that is going to check your inputs to your outputs, what was sent in the data grids versus what comes back from the gross to net. As a partner, I've uploaded the gross to net and I get immediate feedback on where that might have discrepancies from the data grid. You can see here, when we're coming to holiday hours for Victoria Howard, for example, the data grid value for that was 6, but when I processed the gross to net, value for that was 15. There's a difference of 9. Now, maybe that is correct. Maybe there was an out of cycle adjustment. Maybe you received a phone call to say, oh, you know what, actually we put in the wrong value in the data grid. Let's go on ahead and mark that. That's okay. I can just say that that's fine. I made a mistake there. That's all fine. You notice here, I haven't deleted any of the data here. What I've done is I've just dismissed that highlight. I've accepted that difference. I've said, yep, I understand that that difference is there. We have a reason for that. You can give a custom reason, or you can choose from some of our pre-selected reasons. Of course, again, in keeping with our theme of managing by the exceptions rather than by the things that seem to be correct, we can just go ahead and view the differences. And you can see here, there's a number of differences between my data grid and my gross to net, some different values, some different numerical values, and some different currency values. This makes it really, really easy for me to focus in on what might need some manual checking. I don't have to view the whole data set. I don't have to manually check every single row. I can just focus in on what I think doesn't look right or what the system thinks doesn't look right. If it's more helpful for me, I can review that in a percentage, particularly when we're talking about grossed up values. I think that's a helpful method to view these differences here. And again, whenever we're accepting these differences, we're just making a note to ourselves to say, we know why that is. That's okay. I do want to note also, although we're not showing it here because it relates to the configuration, we're also allowing you to configure this to check the things that matter to you. Some things are going to change every single month, and it's not valuable for you to have those highlighted every time you look at the data validation tab. That's fine. When you set up this tab, you tell us where you think that automated checking is going to be of the highest benefit to you. Again, making sure that we focus in on those exceptions, that we focus in on the questions that we really want to ask and answer of our data. So with this, as I mentioned, you get that instant feedback on the gross to net before you even request approval from the customer. So you get instant feedback and the ability to potentially correct or make a note about why something is marked as a discrepancy. I should note also, although I'm looking at this in the partner view, this view is also visible for the customer with those discrepancy highlighted. So when you are going to approve payroll, you also have the ability to review these tabs, to have a little look and see where does the data mismatch and is that correct? Again, helping you to approve or reject payroll based on the areas that you really need to focus in on.
So Jen, it's just Trevor here for a moment. So what you're saying is that these tools are available to both the provider and to the customer. So the provider sees what they've processed first, they can make their corrections. And then as part of the approval process, the customer gets to see the same thing. That's
absolutely correct. Yeah. So it's a double benefit. It's because we know that there's manual checking that goes on both sides. Obviously, the provider wants to make sure that the payroll is as correct as possible before they send it. And then there's manual checks done by the customer to make sure that the payroll matches up with what they had expected based on what they sent. So both parties get to see this.
Yeah. So overall, we're driving quality into the process, not just from the customer perspective, but also helping providers here, because you got to remember that I suppose payroll is this end-to-end process, and we all have a part to play. So we just focus on the benefits to the customer. Why not get these items corrected at source if, for example, the provider has made a mistake along the way? So let's give them the intelligence as well, right?
Exactly. So because we show, for example, the value on the data grid and the gross to net, because we allow you to focus in on maybe where that discrepancy has come from, you can filter down by the data grid, you can filter down by errors, you can filter by element. As you mentioned, in the first instance, we get that kind of provider view of being able to get that validation. But then from the customer point of view, there's also the ability to say, oh, you know what, that was not right in the data grid, and we need to change that in our HR system. We need to change that in our data grids going forward. We need to validate the data that we're sending as well, so that the overall data quality improves in both directions, because we're both getting that instant feedback, even before we approve payroll and without that level of manual checking.
Yeah, got it. Thanks, Jen.
No problem. So yeah, I think it's really helpful to see it because you see it instantly. Yes, we would probably turn this up with our manual checking, but that would take time. You would have to do this manual checking. It could be a couple of days, someone's waiting to have you approve payroll, and it's waiting for these manual checks to be done. In this case, we're able to focus right in on what needs a look. So I want to jump briefly to our second tab, because I do also know that I'm sure people have questions. I see that there's numbers in the chat box, so I'm sure people have questions. So I want to just pop onto our other tab here that joins us as part of this expansion of our data automation, and that is joiners and leavers. Obviously, in addition to all the things that we've mentioned, variable pay, new government charges, etc., a big area of payroll change is joiners and leavers. Who's coming onto the payroll and who is leaving the payroll? It's an area where there's a huge potential for error or even fraud. And it's very important that we're clear every time. If there's someone new coming onto the payroll, make sure that they definitely did go onto the payroll. And if someone left the payroll, that we're sure that they did actually leave the payroll, so that we don't pay people we shouldn't, and so that we don't miss paying new employees. So we've added this joiners leavers tab to highlight that front and center. We want to show you each time you run a pay period who has joined and who has left. So you can see here, we have a couple of joiners in this period and some leavers too. Max, Miranda, and Maya have all left us. And we've got a couple of joiners. You'll note one is highlighted in red here. That's because this is someone who's joined and we have some data for them on the gross to net, but we did not have some information for them on the data grid. We didn't have a join date. Again, great immediate feedback for the provider. Was that person supposed to be on the gross to net? And also great feedback for the customer, because maybe they were in fact supposed to be on the data grid and the gross to net, but they were missed on the data grid, or we missed filling in their join date. Again, a great opportunity to make sure that the data quality remains high all the way through the process. So those are two tabs.
So Jen, before you move on there, I think just back to auditability and control, and also this point around automation. So you can see that we're giving you information to apply your judgment and common sense here, because if I take just a quick look at the activity log, we're recording those data validation records that are dismissed. So even though you make that judgment call, that record is still maintained in the system.
Absolutely, it's all auditable and tracked. So in addition to the fact that, as I mentioned, you're not deleting the data when you dismiss a highlight, you're just dismissing the highlight. You're accepting that the difference is there and you know why it's there, for example. We do also log that, so that when, for example, a customer is reviewing these tabs, you can see these records were dismissed, the reason that was given, and if you have employee level data access, you can drill right down and understand what is the list of differences, especially if it's multiple differences. So you can have a look at that file and understand all of the differences that were marked as accepted. So as with our usual kind of expectations, of course, we audit all of this in the activity log. So it's traceable back and we can understand when those decisions were made and who made them. Again, really fantastic for making sure that the data quality gets even better each time between customer and provider.
Look, I think they're great enablers, because what it allows you to do is to keep the payroll process running, right? So if you did find an anomaly, you're up against your payroll cutoff date. Just because you found an anomaly related to one employee, at least you know about it, but you're not stopping the process for everybody else in that payroll. So you're using technology in a smart way that brings human judgment into the process, but at the same time, management by exception and automation coming to play, but not taking that key human judgment out of it.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point as well. All of these things that we're flagging on the data validation tab and the joiners leavers tab, they're advisory. So we won't ever stop the payroll process as a result of this. We're just advising you. We're helping to focus in that kind of that human nuance and that human judgment, and that human understanding of your own data on both sides. We're just helping to focus that in to save some time, but it is advisory. So if, as I mentioned in some of these examples, perhaps we discussed this Candace Perry offline. The phone rang and you said, that's I forgot to put that person in there, my bad, no problem. And we're all agreed that that's fine. We're still going to be able to process that payroll. We know why this highlight is here. We can just accept it and say, yep, that's fine. It was discussed on the phone and we're all good. So it's kind of advising on the correctness or any differences that we see without, as you said, blocking that process, without making it so that you can't actually get payroll through, especially if you're on a deadline.
Super. Thanks, Jen.
So I see there's a number of chat messages. Maybe I'll stop my share and we can see if there are questions.
Yeah, I was actually going to suggest that we move to Q&A now. We've been talking and presenting for a little while. I'm sure some people must have questions about this. So if you would like to ask those, you feel free to pop them into the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen, and maybe we can clear up, any doubts you have.
Or maybe it was all so clear.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's I see one here. Will data validation be standard for all clients or a select service? So again, kind of keeping with the configurability, it's applicable for where and when you want to use it. The data grids are a prerequisite because obviously that's how we have the HR data or the gross to nets to compare to. But you can use it where it makes sense for you to use it. It's not mandatory on all of your pay groups. You're going to use it where it makes sense. Maybe some of your pay groups, it's not that big. It's only a couple of employees. The manual check doesn't take long. So it'll be available for you to kind of add in where it makes sense to you, which I think is really one of our principles here at Payzaar. You add in the modules where they make sense for your business case and as and when they're going to work for you to smooth your processes.
Yeah. Do we have any other ones? Any other questions? No. Jen, that means that you did a killer job and everything was crystal clear, and yeah, no one has any doubts.
Super. I hope it means that everyone is excitedly thinking about all the ways that they could integrate this into their processes and all of the time that they will save. Not running a ton of manual spreadsheets together or doing a lot of data manipulation to get the kind of data that we're going to present to you every time you run. I think it's a super exciting feature. I'm very excited about it. I think it has great potential. If we think about that 60% number that you showed right at the very, very start of this on our before picture and our ideal after picture, where we hopefully shave more and more time off of that 60%. I certainly, as I said, I hope that everyone is just thinking of all of the ways that this can help them shave down that 60% to a nicer number.
Yeah. I think since we don't have any more questions coming in, I think we'll wrap it up here. And just to reiterate what I said at the beginning, we recorded this session. We will post the video on our YouTube channel. We will be sharing it on LinkedIn, and we will be sending it to you by email. We'll probably send it out on Monday. We will also share the deck that we used. So if you want to share that with your team, your colleagues, et cetera, you'll be able to do that. If you have any questions, if you would like to know more, we're always happy to talk. You can reach out to us through our website. I will be sending you the deck, so you could just send me an email if you want to, and I'm happy to chat further. And then the last thing I'll mention is that we are doing a live demo session in a few weeks. So if you follow us on social media, you know that we talk about these periodically. We do one every month. And live demo sessions are where we try to go a little bit more in depth on functionality, on features, and how the product works and stuff like that. And we will be focusing on data validation. Since this is a new feature that we're releasing to the market now, we want to provide, a better, deeper explanation of how it works. So if you would like to see more of it, if you would like to ask questions, stuff like that, you could sign up to that. That will take place on April 19th. And you can find a link to sign up to that again through our website if you check the webinars section in the menu or on our social media channels. That is it for me. Trevor, Jen, maybe you guys want to say a couple words farewell.
Yeah, I just thank everyone for the time, and hopefully you'll join us on this journey to make payroll better, because that's what we're here to do. We're here to alleviate some of those challenges and find good solutions using technology that supports the job you do. So thanks very much for attending today.
Oh wait, look, we do have a question right here. We could pick this up, even though we were going to say goodbye. We have a question from Antonio, and he says, I would like to have more information regarding the integration between systems and what are the probabilities of inserting employees in a group if they are new hire. Yeah, so maybe we can answer this and end with that. How about that?
Sure. So one of the things I showed on the data grid there was me dropping, for example, an extract from Workday, for example. Something I didn't show, but which is possible, is live adding data in the data grid as well. You don't need to go back for another extract from the system if the person isn't set up in your HR system yet, but you know that they need to go onto the payroll. You can just go ahead and add a new row straight in the data grid. It's already configured to have all of the data that you need in there, in that kind of format. So you can just live add people, insert them in there into the data grid, and then they get sent over to the provider. Once then, obviously, the provider processes them, then they should show up in the gross to net, and they'll show up in the system also. So that's probably the quickest way to get an employee if they're a new hire and they're not in your HR extract.
Yeah. Okay. Well, now I think we are gonna wrap up. So thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope this was interesting. I hope you enjoyed it. As you know, you can find more of our webinars and more of our content on YouTube and on LinkedIn. And as I said, we're gonna have another event on the 19th of April, which you are very welcome to attend if you want to. Thank you so much. Take care, and hope to see you soon.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Bye-bye.